So when you hear the words microbes, bacteria, or fungi, what's the very first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, let's be honest, it's disease, it's dirt, danger. We've been completely conditioned to think of these tiny microscopic organisms as villains that we just need to sanitize and scrub away. But today, we're going to completely flip that script. Welcome to this explainer where we're shining a massive spotlight on the incredible, unseen benefits of the microscopic world. Look, just like every snake isn't venomous, every microbe is certainly not harmful. In fact, as you're about to see, many of them are the absolute unsung heroes keeping us alive, fueling our world, and literally cleaning up our biggest messes.
Here's the roadmap for our journey today. First, we'll look at the good microbes. Then, microbes in your kitchen. Third, industrial-scale microorganisms. Fourth, cleaning our wastewater. And finally, biogas and greener farming.
Section 1. The good microbes, reframing our invisible roommates. Okay, let's dive right into this. To truly understand microbes, we first have to wrap our heads around just how incredibly omnipresent they really are.
I mean, they exist literally everywhere on Earth. They're in the soil, the water, the air, inside plants, and yes, inside animals, including us. But what's truly mind-blowing here is their resilience. You can find them thriving in extreme environments where absolutely nothing else has a chance of surviving. We're talking about deep-sea thermal vents pushing 100 degrees Celsius, buried deep beneath layers of freezing snow, or even living in highly acidic soils. And while they're totally invisible to us as single cells, scientists can actually grow them in laboratory colonies on a petri dish until they form these massive clusters you can see with the naked eye. So far from just being disease-causing pests, these little omnipresent survivors are actually absolutely vital to human welfare.
Moving on to Part 2. Microbes in your kitchen, the science behind your breakfast. Let's transition away from that abstract macro level and ground the science in a highly relatable environment, your very own kitchen. Because you might not realize it, but you are likely performing microbiology experiments every single morning.
I want you to picture a slice of bread, or maybe a traditional Indian breakfast like idli or dosa. If you look closely at them, they all share a really distinct physical characteristic. They're full of tiny little holes. But why? Have you ever actually stopped to wonder what creates those fluffy pores?
Well, the answer is quite literally breathing bacteria and fungi. When you make bread, you're using baker's yeast, or scientifically, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. When this yeast is added to glucose, it performs anaerobic respiration, basically a process without oxygen that we know is fermentation. As the yeast digests those sugars, it releases carbon dioxide gas and a tiny bit of alcohol. And that carbon dioxide? It gets trapped right there in the dough, pushing it upward and outward. When you bake it, the gas escapes, leaving behind those fluffy, soft pores that make your breakfast so incredibly delicious. Carbon dioxide is literally the secret biological ingredient.
Notice how specific microbes are entirely responsible for our favorite foods. These exact pairings are absolutely crucial to remember. Take lactobacillus, for example. When you add a tiny spoonful of curd to warm milk, this bacteria digests the milk proteins and creates lactic acid, giving us curd. But it doesn't just change the texture, it actively increases vitamin B12, making it super nutritious. And hey, next time you see Swiss cheese with those massive, cartoonish holes, just like in the old Tom and Jerry cartoons, you can thank the bacteria Propionibacterium charmani for producing those massive amounts of CO2. And that uniquely textured, sharp-tasting Roquefort cheese? Yep, that's the work of a specific fungus called Penicillium roqueforti.
Okay, Section 3. Industrial-scale microorganisms, accidental discoveries, and bioactive molecules. We've seen the micro level right in our homes. Now let's scale this narrative way up to the macro level, moving from household food to massive industrial vats and life-saving medicines.
Let me tell you a quick story of serendipity. It's an accidental discovery that literally changed the course of human history. So, scientist Alexander Fleming was working with a harmful bacteria called Staphylococcus. Frustrated with his lack of progress, he just tossed a petri dish aside. When he came back the next day, a strange mold had grown all over it. But astonishingly, this mold, called Penicillium notatum, was releasing a chemical that was completely killing the surrounding bacteria. No way, right? It was the world's very first antibiotic, penicillin. Later on, scientist Florian Chain unlocked its true medical potential, mass-producing it just in time to save countless wounded soldiers from fatal infections during World War II. And for this monumental accident-turned-miracle, all three men won the Nobel Prize in 1945.
Fast forward to today,
And microbes are absolute industrial workhorses. The crucial point here is that we purposefully cultivate these organisms in massive factories just to harvest the chemicals and enzymes they naturally produce. For instance, the fungus Aspergillus niger gives us citric acid, which is a massive source of vitamin C. Acetobacter acei produces the acetic acid we use every day as household vinegar. But look at row 3 on this table. The bacteria Streptococcus produces streptokinase. That's an enzyme literally used in medicine as a clot buster to dissolve life-threatening blood clots in patients. And here's a super relatable one for you, the enzyme lipase. When you throw a shirt with a stubborn oil or butter stain into the washing machine, it's actually the microbial lipase enzyme inside your laundry detergent that actively digests and removes those stubborn fat stains. How cool is that?
We also derive these incredibly complex bioactive molecules from fungi. And why does this matter? Well, imagine a patient receiving a kidney transplant. The human immune system naturally wants to attack that foreign organ, right? It wants to reject it. To prevent this, doctors use a drug called cyclosporin A, which is an immunosuppressant derived directly from the fungus Trichoderma polysporum. Or think about the millions of people suffering from high cholesterol. They take statins, a medication that safely lowers blood cholesterol levels. And guess what? That is produced by a fungus called Monoscus purpureus. These microscopic organisms are quite literally keeping our bodies from failing.
Which brings us to Section 4, cleaning our wastewater, the epic battle inside the sewage treatment plant, or STP. Let's step out of the pharmacy for a second and confront a massive planetary problem, human waste. What actually happens to the water when we flush our toilets or wash our dishes? Well, to save our cities from literally drowning in toxic waste, we rely on an epic, microscopic battle right inside the STP. We can deconstruct the really complex engineering of an STP into 3 sequential steps. Step 1 is the primary treatment. This is purely physical. Giant filters remove all the floating debris like plastics, while the heavy stuff settles to the bottom as sludge. But the water is still full of invisible, dissolved organic human waste. And that brings us to Step 2, secondary treatment. The water gets moved to massive aeration tanks filled with oxygen and biological flocks, which are essentially these mesh-like structures of bacteria and fungi. These microbes literally gorge on the organic waste. Finally, in Step 3, the remaining mass is moved over to a sludge digester, where a completely different set of bacteria takes over the job.
Now, to truly understand the biology of that second step, you absolutely must understand this next concept, BOD, or biochemical oxygen demand. This is a highly tested, super crucial definition. BOD is simply the amount of oxygen that bacteria need to consume all the organic waste in exactly 1 liter of water. Think of it like the bacteria's appetite. If the water's highly polluted with waste, the bacteria are going to have a massive appetite, demanding a huge amount of oxygen. Therefore, high BOD equals high pollution. Makes sense, right? As the bacteria eat up the waste, the BOD naturally drops, signaling that the water is finally clean enough to be released safely back into our rivers.
And this whole process brilliantly illustrates how engineers have basically pitted microbes against each other to finish the cleanup. In the aeration tank, we rely on aerobic bacteria. They need oxygen to survive, forming those flocks we talked about to vigorously eat up the human waste. But once the water is clean, we're left with huge masses of these aerobic bacteria. So what do we do with them? Well, we send them to the final tank, the sludge digester. Now this tank has 0 oxygen. Here, anaerobic bacteria live. They act as the biological enemies. The anaerobes completely consume the aerobic bacteria flocks, and in the process, they burp out highly combustible biogas.
Section 5, Biogas and Greener Farming, Nature's Built-in Planetary Recycling System. Let's see how this all builds into our final section, scaling things way up to the planetary level. The exact same biological mechanisms used in waste treatment are now being harnessed to create sustainable energy and protect our agricultural systems. This brings us to biogas plants, which are highly utilized in rural areas as just a brilliant zero-waste energy system. And it all starts with cows. Cows eat grass, which contains really tough cellulose. To digest this, they have special bacteria called methanogens living in a part of their stomach called the rumen. When cows produce dung, it's already packed with these methanogens. Farmers just place this dung into an anaerobic digester tank. Just like in the water treatment plant, these bacteria break down the matter without any oxygen, releasing biogas, a mixture of methane, CO2, and hydrogen sulfide. That gas is piped directly into rural homes to fuel stoves for cooking. And honestly, the best part? Literally nothing goes to waste. The leftover sludge is incredibly nutrient-rich and is spread right back onto the fields as agricultural manure. It is the perfect loop.
Microbes and insects also offer a much greener way to protect our crops. For decades, we've just sprayed toxic chemical pesticides that poison the soil and harm the good insects. But using biocontrol agents, that's like deploying nature's own biological weapons. If your plants are covered in crop-destroying aphids, you don't spray poison, you just release ladybird beetles to naturally hunt and eat them. Dragonflies are perfectly designed to control mosquito populations. And down at the microscopic level, we have baculoviruses. These are highly specific pathogens that target and kill only crop-destroying arthropods. They have an incredibly narrow spectrum, meaning they are completely safe for plants, mammals, birds, and the beneficial insects we want to keep around.
And finally, we have biofertilizers. Instead of relying on dangerous chemical fertilizers to enrich the soil, we can just let microbes do all the heavy lifting naturally. Rhizobium bacteria, for example, live right inside the roots of plants, literally pulling nitrogen straight out of the atmosphere and feeding it directly to the plant. In flooded paddy fields, aquatic cyanobacteria like Anabina act as vital nitrogen-fixing fertilizers. And then there's mycorrhiza. This is a beautiful symbiotic relationship where a fungus wraps around the roots of higher plants like the pinus tree. The fungus acts like a massive sponge, absorbing phosphorus and water to make the plant highly resistant to drought, while the plant feeds the fungus in return. It's teamwork at its finest.
From fluffing up our morning bread, to fighting off infections in the trenches of World War II, to quietly digesting the toxic waste of entire megacities. Microbes are unequivocally the unsung heroes of human welfare. We have truly only just scratched the surface of what they can do. So I'll leave you with this thought. If these tiny invisible organisms can clean our water, fuel our homes, and heal our bodies today, what other incredible, world-saving biological secrets are just sitting in a petri dish somewhere, waiting to be accidentally discovered? Thank you so much for exploring the microscopic world with me today. Stay curious and keep learning.